Aaron Tattersall here with another episode of At the Table with AgRisk Advisors, where we discuss timely and relevant issues challenging the ranchers and farmers we serve every day. You'll be hearing from industry experts and our advisors as we examine risk management programs to protect your legacy. Well, this is Aaron Tattersall with AgRisk Advisors, and I've got Alex Anaya with me, another AgRisk advisor, and then on the phone we have Dave Paul. We'll do some introductions here, and we wanted to just talk about the Whole Farm Revenue Protection Program. And so, Alex, why don't you kind of introduce yourself, and then we'll kick it off to Dave to let him give his bio.
Cool. Yeah, no, it's good to be here. I'm glad we're doing this finally. So I'm Alex Anaya. I'm another advisor here with AgRisk Advisors, work alongside Aaron Tattersall, and kind of enjoy going out, meeting with producers, and doing some education on different risk management programs. So
that's right. And then Dave's joining us via phone. And so, Dave, could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron and Alex. So I'm Dave Paul with Anaya Country Insurance, and real quick background so we can kind of focus on the whole farm here. But I've got about 42 years of experience in the crop insurance business and fully retired from the federal government. I worked for the RMA, the Risk Management Agency, for 32 years, and my last stint was 20 years in the Spokane region, where I was the regional director, and worked a lot, obviously, on the whole farm thing. Retired in 2014 and did some contract work for a couple of years. And for the last almost 7 years, I've been a vice president of underwriting for Anaya Country, largely focused on the whole farm revenue protection policy.
You've definitely seen a lot of changes, Dave, and I remember back when this program was called AGR Light. Was that what it was?
Well, it was AGR, and then shortly thereafter, another component of it came out as AGR Light. Yeah,
I see.
Yeah, so I actually started working on AGR back in 1998, and literally have worked on AGR Light, and whole farm revenue protection pretty much every day since 1998. So tells you how old I am.
Also, it sounds like we got the right guy on the phone, Alex.
yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
Well, Dave, let's just fast forward to the last couple years on whole farm revenue protection. What kind of growth have you seen, or areas where it's been helpful to different producers around the country?
Yeah, so over the history of AGR and whole farm revenue protection, the vast majority of sales has always been in the Pacific Northwest, and that's an area where when I was at RMA, I kind of built that program out there with our staff in Spokane. But when whole farm revenue protection came out for 2015, we saw a significant growth in specific areas, Michigan, which was actually, I think I was telling you guys the other day, it's where AGR initiated, was out of Michigan by Michigan Farm Bureau and Michigan State University. But we've seen considerable growth in Michigan with vegetable growers and really, really diversified producers in that area that don't often have the same opportunities for multi-peril. We've seen tremendous growth in areas like North Carolina, California, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, even in Montana, and so on. So, it's picking up outside of the Pacific Northwest, where previous to whole farm revenue protection, the AGR days, almost all of the business was in the Northwest.
If you could describe whole farm revenue protection in, if it's possible, in a sentence or two, how would you do that, Dave?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, but I mean, great question or great point. I think the one thing I've always kind of referenced it as, and back in if you remember the old McDonald's days, the full meal deal, and I used to always reference it like that because I think the component of whole farm that I like the most is you have tremendous yield protection, but you also add the pricing component into the equation on every commodity. And the other thing, it covers everything that's produced on a grower's farm operation. So you get basically full kinds of coverage. You get yield protection, you get quality protection, and you get price protection all in one package. And the other component of it is it's very highly subsidized,
I see.
particularly at the 75% coverage level. It's 80% subsidized. And if you're an organic producer for 2023, you get an additional 10% subsidy. So you could get up to a 90% subsidy. And that equates to, premium rates for producer paid premium rates anywhere from 1% to 3%, depending upon where you are. So, kind of, I guess it's a little longer answer than you were probably looking for, but
That's okay. It sounds like they're giving it away.
well, and it's pretty close to that.
But I mean, it's good that we finally have something that's available for specialty crop producers. I
You
mean, you
bet.
see that quite a bit. Southern Colorado, that's primarily what our farmers are located. Chili farmers, vegetable farmers.
Yeah.
So, Dave, with this program too, for some individuals on this specialty crop side, you see a lot of specialty crop producers doing things with farm stands and selling their own produce, selling their own crop. Does this integrate well, and how would you recommend kind of these guys looking into this a little bit different, because their risk management structure is tailored a little bit differently than a traditional farmer.
Yeah, so actually, the Risk Management Agency has made some really good changes in the past couple of years on direct market, and they 2 years ago would have been for program for 2 years ago. I think this will be the third year now. They initiated what I'd call a combined direct market code, where it used to be that a direct market producer would have to provide some data and some verifiable documentation on each commodity. If they're selling at a farm stand and they're selling 25 different commodities or 12 or 10 or whatever, they'd have to keep track of everything separately. And it became a sort of an enormous paper load burden. And a couple of years ago, NAU Country and myself, we worked with RMA to kind of craft something a little bit different, where you can combine all of your farmers market commodities into one line on the farm operation report and provide some verifiable documentation or certify some verifiable documentation to get an expected value per acre. So essentially, RMA reduced some of the paperwork associated with a direct market producer to make it a lot easier to put the policy together. And it really works well. We have written a whole bunch of direct market policies over the last year or two, and are looking to write a bunch more hopefully this year. So, and the other thing is those producers don't have a lot of other options, and
Right.
and to be able to go out and buy a product that's going to cover them for their production and their quality and their sales is something that's hard to do. So, great opportunity there.
Yeah, it's kind of a game changer in different things if you think about it.
Alex, you had a
It is, and when RMA came out with in 15 with the 80% subsidy at the 75% level, that's what I called it, a game changer.
Yeah.
It's when you go out and that's the thing I always encourage growers, quote it. Look at your operation, quote it, and see just how affordable it is.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Alex, you had a producer ask about some water concerns coming into this next year, the years in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's, especially on the Arkansas Valley down there in southeastern Colorado and stuff, we see this quite a bit, Dave. And, one of the main questions when it comes to water, and I know water's a really tricky issue, especially when we get into crop insurance in general, right? But, if there's an individual, let's say they've got $1.5 million in approved revenue over their 5-year history, and they have an intended farm plan. It's looking like everything's going to be all right. We pass the 3/15 sales closing deadline, and all of a sudden they go from, let's say getting 100% or even 90% of their water to like 45%. So their farm plan changes drastically come revised farm operation report time. and they go from planting 1,300 acres to, let's say, 500. Let's just do something drastic here. How does
Yeah.
that work? Because that's a huge loss in revenue for some of these guys,
Yeah.
and that's a risk that these guys are seeing on a year-to-year basis. How does the whole farm revenue protection program, help with that side of things?
Yeah. So that's a tricky question too. One I hesitate to generalize on. But irrigation, basically what it boils down is when the producer is filling out their paperwork, and more specific, their farm operation report
Hmm.
that they submit with their application every year. Um, Basically, it's if they have a reasonable expectation of receiving adequate irrigation water at the time they're filling out their farm operation report for the acres and commodities they put on their farm operation report. Generally, those would be covered throughout the rest of the growing season. So
Okay.
if you come down into July and the water gets shut off, but there was a reasonable expectation when you filled out your paperwork and bought the insurance, um, those types of losses would be covered. But it really takes, a company like ours, any country, we do a lot of work on that. We really try to make sure that on the underwriting side of things that we're aware of what's going on and we're monitoring water and those kinds of things. But irrigation, basically, the federal government's rules are, we'll cover. You have a reasonable expectation of getting adequate water as of the point you fill out your application.
I gotcha. That makes sense. Well, it's good to hear that. I mean, at least they're covered.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just from my drive here this morning, uh, the West Coast is getting hammered, and I think a lot of that's moving through. But there's another storm brewing. But I was listening to RFD radio here this morning, and outside of some of the plain states and maybe Colorado and Kansas, some of those other areas are getting hit hard, and hopefully that'll roll across to Colorado and Kansas too. So,
Yeah, we need a little bit of a break,
shoot,
I guess, this spring for some of our
yeah.
guys. So, but
Well, speaking of weather, and how can whole farm help maybe a hay operation with hay damage from too much rain?
Yeah, so I love this policy for hay growers. And you gotta quantify that a little bit. So if you're a hay grower and you're selling hay, that's
I see.
that's what we cover. We're
yep.
not going to cover the hay that's being fed. But for those guys that are growing hay and selling it, there isn't a better product out there, in my opinion, and I've said that for years. Because you've got, again, the full pack, your yield protection, which most of those hay guys are irrigated. They're not too worried about their production, but they are worried about their hay getting rained on
Yeah.
and so on. And this product is, again, we're going to set a value, working with the grower, set a value for what they expect to sell their hay for this year based on their average yield. And we're going to lock that in at sales closing. And then if two or three cuttings get rained on and their income is significantly reduced, they're covered. And
Right.
and the RMA has a forage production policy in a lot of counties, but
Yep.
it's just a yield policy, and again, most hay guys aren't too concerned about yield. They're the irrigated guys, the
Right.
dryland guys might be, but
It's a lot of price.
so I like go back to your question. I love this product for the hay guys.
Yeah, I think there's tremendous growth with it too, especially for a hay producer, not having
Yeah,
any type of multi-peril crop. Like you said, there's the forage production, which is a really good policy, especially for non-irrigated hay guys up, up north, kind of in the Wyoming, Montana areas. But down south, you don't really have much forage production opportunities here. So outside of
yeah.
FSA NAP programs, this could be like you said earlier, game changer.
Yeah, and there's no quality protection on the multi-peril, which
Right.
when I worked at RMA, we spent years trying to figure out how to add quality, but now you got it with whole farm.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the volatility with the price markets and the hay markets and everything every year, depending on drought and, how much hay is
Yeah.
actually produced, this is a pretty good program for them to look into.
So
Yeah.
with the the liability on a whole farm policy is a function of several different things, obviously. But let's maybe talk about producers that are growing their operation that might not have the history of as much revenue coming in the last couple of years. Are there what's available to kind of bump up a guarantee for them and make it more reasonable for what they're growing? Are there some things like that in the program?
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess to start with is the first component is their 5-year history and their revenue from their farm income taxes,
Mm-hmm.
Which would be for 2023, be 2021, 20, 19, 18, and 17, if my mind is working correctly here. But
I think that's right.
and so if the farm operation is growing in those later years, the system has RMA initiated a component called indexing, and if either the last 2 years, 20 or 21, are greater than the simple average of their historic revenue, then if they choose to index, that will trend their 5-year history up. And so that's a component that if your operation is growing in your history, your 5-year history that's used to set the cap coverage on your policy, indexing can significantly increase the simple average to an index average. And if your operation is growing physically, essentially, at the same time, there's an expanded operation component that basically, if you're gonna, if your operation is getting bigger and you got more acres in the lag year, which would be 2022, or the current year, which would be 2023, there's an expanded operation component, basically that you can factor up to 135% of your average
Wow.
to grow that average to help you get a little bit closer to what your operation is doing today compared to your history.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, we've had a lot of talk about that lately, especially down in southern Colorado. Some of the younger guys are taking over the family farms, wanting to grow the business a little bit more and, pick up
Yeah.
more acreage. We've seen a lot of guys that have started to leave the agricultural and the farming industry now, and some different families starting to pick up that ground. So I think expanding operation is a pretty big deal.
Yep, for sure.
Alex, you've been able to visit with some folks about this micro farm program.
Oh yeah, it's my favorite. Tell
Is
you
it?
what, yeah,
Why is
I
that?
really like it. Well, we've been talking about whole farm. It's just a branch of whole farm, and Dave could probably attest to this too. But it provides the option for some smaller individual, even hobby family farms to be involved in crop insurance. A lot of these guys have private insurance, and when they think of insurance in general, it's more property and casualty, it's commercial insurance, things like that. But now depending on the size of the operation, it doesn't matter if you're 2 acres or 200 acres, you have crop insurance available for you. And I think that's why micro farm is a pretty awesome addition, I think, to this. And Dave, did it come out in 2021? Is that when the first micro farm?
Yeah, actually, yeah, it came out in 2021, 2022. But yeah, no, so 2022 was the first year, was $100,000 limit.
Okay, yep, that's
And
right.
then RMA expanded that limit for 2023 to 350 for a new insured, or 400,000 for carryover. And just a quick note on the difference. And I'm with you, Alex. I am a huge proponent of this micro farms, and it basically is the whole farm revenue protection program scaled back in terms of the requirements to provide information.
Yep.
Still have to provide your tax information, but we're gonna essentially set an expected revenue. It's kind of like combined direct market. We're gonna set an expected revenue on a per acre basis,
Yep.
and we're going to ensure the producer, and at every micro farm producer can buy up to 85% of their approved revenue, and do it without a whole lot of the requirements that are under the larger, more PANS, whole farm revenue protection program, essentially. And
Right.
it just makes it So if a guy looks at his 5-year average on his Schedule F, what is that? And then his average revenue per acre for how many acres he's going to grow or they're going to grow in 2023, and you insure off the lesser of those two numbers, and you get up to 85% coverage, you can get a significant subsidy, and you get complete and all around protection. And I think this micro farm policy, for what I would, some people would call a $400,000 operation small, but for those people, they're not small.
No,
they're
not at all.
They're a very, very viable organization, and so on. And again, it's kind of like I mentioned earlier. I would strongly encourage anybody kind of in that revenue threshold to sit down with you guys and just run a quote. It'll take you 10 minutes, to run a quote on this and really get a handle on. Again, what you can probably buy this insurance for 1.5 to 2.5, 3%.
Right. At an 80% subsidy rate.
Your liability, which is crazy reasonable, in terms of cost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like you said, 400,000. That's a decent size operation. I would say that's probably an average size hay operation in itself. One commodity line. These guys don't have to worry about a whole heck of a lot of stuff. It's a pretty niche little market.
The thing about it on the hay, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we covered a couple of hay guys last year on that micro farm. But if you're just growing irrigated alfalfa or irrigated hay, you only qualify with one commodity on the whole farm, which restricts you a bunch. You don't get the whole farm subsidy. You don't get a lot of other things. If you insure that same farm under a micro farm policy, you get the complete subsidy. You're technically, in terms of RMA lingo, you qualify with 3 qualifying commodities, even though you only have one.
Right.
That's a no-brainer. If you're a hay guy, you're right around that $400,000 threshold. Micro farm policy all the way versus traditional whole farm.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, increasing the limit on micro farms seemed to be open up a lot of opportunity.
I think so. Absolutely. I mean.
Yeah, and and RMA put that out in 2022. I think right after they did it, they realized they undercut themselves on that thing. And NAU country, we communicate with RMA every day, and we were like, this thing could work really, really well if we can get those limits up. And our RMA, of course, is good enough to revise those limits, and heck, they might go up again. So we'll see. But
well, that's good stuff. We're kind of nearing the end here. I think we probably should talk about deadlines and process, and how we can get information out to producers about this. So
yeah, absolutely.
So we've got March 15th for most people. That's the sign up deadline for 2023. What are some next steps? Either Alex or Dave.
Go ahead, Alex, if you want to jump in on there. So.
Oh, I mean, we kind of talked a little bit about it, is just getting involved, understanding, what type of tax information we need, Schedule F history, things like that for some different operations, making sure we have a solid initial farm operation report. Let's put that into play before the March 15th deadline. From then on, we've got a couple other deadlines after that, the revised farm operation in July 15th there. But, that's essentially just like your multi-peril acreage reporting. We're just reporting the acres that you planted. And that's what I really like about this program is, you essentially have 3 deadlines. You still have your final farm operation report, but everything is, at that point, everything's then based off your tax history, right? So,
and a lot of times I'll just tell folks that are interested, just give us information you're giving your banker, for your budgeting this next year. That'll get us a good start. And of course, you need tax information too, but we'll try to make it easy for them.
Yeah, as painless as possible. It's a homework project on our end, but it's kind of a fun one.
That's right. A little project.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing I'd add there too is don't wait until March 15th.
Right.
And if particularly with the whole farm policy, because there's a fair amount of stuff that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And so give yourself for your producers. I recommend, and I'm sure you guys do this all the time. Is let's not wait till the 15th, because it might be hard to get a policy put together on the last day.
It might be some long hours, I'll tell you what.
Yeah, we want to do the best for the growers, and having more information earlier on, the better. So,
Right.
well, our website, agriskadvisors.com, is a great place to find our contact information. Alex, you might show your cell phone or something like that if you want to. And then, Dave, if you've got some NAU resources to refer to, that would be helpful too.
Yeah, absolutely. I work with Aaron. You guys can call our office line, 303-539-9300. I work with a lot of guys on the whole farm program as well, just like Aaron. So if you want to reach out for some more information, my cell phone is 719-252-2691. Be happy to just jump online with you guys, maybe come out to your operation. Let's just chat a little bit.
You bet. And then, Dave, is there anything in particular on the NAU Country website that might be helpful or?
Yeah, thanks. And we write one in probably every 5 or 4 whole farm policies around. We have a real experienced team at NAU to make sure, we write it right and they get what they thought they had and everything. But www.naUcountry.com actually have a whole page on our website, and there's some presentations, there's some videos, there's fact sheets, there's all kinds of information on microfarms and whole farms on our website as well. So
cool.
Great, and like you said, Dave, just getting that information ahead of time, we can do the best for our producers, and it's a great tool, and it's easy to get a quote. It doesn't. All it's going to cost is some time in the beginning and to see if it's good for an operation. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like we need to write our whole farm with NAU too.
That's right.
We got Dave in our back pocket.
That's right. Well, yeah, having the experience of NAU, especially with Dave, and that just goes such a long way.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We appreciate NAU's support on this, Dave, and really appreciate you taking the time to visit with us about whole farm and microfarm.
Yeah, no, appreciate you guys, and thanks for the opportunity to get the word out. And I think that's the missing component in this whole deal is there's a lot of producers out there that don't know this is available.
Isn't that true?
You bet. Yeah. Well, let's wrap this one up, and we again, AgRisk Advisors, NAU Country, and we'll be on the other end of the phone if anyone gives us a call. So thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.